You can take a flower, roll it up and make it fine. Sprinkle it with knowledge and a little bit of time. Cover it with headlines and a sweet euphoria too. Cannabis man, cannabis man, cannabis man. Spreading news and joy across the land. Diving deep into the growing green. Cannabis man, we're all king.
Hello, and welcome in to another episode of the Cannabis Man Podcast. Thank you so much for clicking on the show. I am your host, Don Kleppen. And I started the show a few years back, if it's your first time here, trying to do my part to kill the stigma that still exists around marijuana. I am a personal user of about 17 or 18 years, and I'm a broadcaster in Chicago, Illinois. I've been on the air here for a little over 12 years, something like that, and I've really enjoyed it. But when Illinois legalized back in 2020, I was really hopeful that the conversations around cannabis would start to normalize and start to give people more of an idea of what the quality of life benefits were, what some medical conditions were that cannabis can help with, why it is that people like myself and so many others around the world find that it helps us, and what it is we enjoy about it and all that. And rather than all the stereotypes and the Cheech and Chong jokes and the reefer madness propaganda that still kind of lingers. And unfortunately, that still hasn't happened yet. And so I like to bring conversations to you here on this show with experts in the field, if those are doctors and researchers, answering questions, studying in the lab, and trying to get us even more information about cannabis, or politicians, policy leaders, elected or appointed, who are making the laws in legal cannabis states and countries, and sort of sussing out how all of that is meant to work. And I'll also talk with, growers and business owners, entrepreneurs, people creating products and services in the space, as well as journalists like myself who cover this, to just try and move the needle a little bit on these conversations around cannabis. And you can get all of that every week here on the Cannabis Man Podcast. If you haven't already, leave a rating or a review for the show. If you're listening on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get this, there's an opportunity to leave a rating, review, comment on the page, share it with your friends. Any and all of that really, really helps me. So if you haven't already, please do. I would appreciate it. You can also follow the show at C-Man Podcast on X and Instagram, and it's the Cannabis Man Podcast Facebook page and YouTube channel. And because there is so much news to cover in the legal cannabis space, this green frontier I talk about all the time is moving and changing every single day. And so that led me to launch the weekly Chronic newsletter, which you can get on Substack. You can subscribe at the link below in the description notes. And the newsletter is where I'll cover stories that I don't get to on these weekly episodes, go into a little more detail about various stories on cannabis, give you exclusive product reviews, breaking down some events that I go to, things that don't necessarily make it into these podcast conversations, but that I do still take part in and that I think are worth your attention or knowledge about. Those are what I share in the weekly Chronic. And again, you can subscribe for free on Substack. And on the topic of cannabis news and just news in general, very big week here in the United States. Obviously, by now you've likely heard that the presidential election was kind of over rather quickly. That was not the expectation, at least in the media circles where I travel. Most of the people thought it would take at least a few days to see who came out on top. And as we now know, former President Donald Trump is now the president-elect once again, and so he will serve a second term starting next year in 2025. And hey, everybody's got their different feelings about it, but this isn't a political show. I'm going to talk to you about how this is going to relate to cannabis specifically. I'll also talk about the results of the referendums, the various ballot initiatives that were on some states in this election on November 5th. I'll tell you how those went. and kind of break down that stuff as well. I, of course, have a conversation with one of those experts that I referenced earlier. This one is an entrepreneur. This is a business owner, and it is somebody who is continuing a family legacy and is doing so with a batch of gummies and a company which is cranking out some really excellent edibles, and I'm talking about OGeez. You may have heard me discuss these before. I have reviewed the products, and I'll get into a talk with their CEO, Bran Noonan, later in this episode, and I will also give you a product review on kind of a multi-pack of their various gummies. I also have the news joint wrap and a couple of other news stories I think are worth sharing with you, so let's get into it on this episode of the Cannabis Man Podcast. Hit it.
This is Tommy Chong, and you're listening to the Cannabis broadcast.
And welcome back. Thanks for listening to the show. I really appreciate your support. I really can't thank you enough. All of you who have subscribed to the show and who are listening from wherever you are in the world. I've got listeners in all 50 states of the U.S., plus Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico and some other U.S. territories, as well as 85 total countries around the world. And that's something that I am still blown away by. And I've been getting a lot more subscribers to the Weekly Chronic. So the interest in the topic is there, and I really appreciate you for supporting what I'm doing here. All of this is a one-man operation thus far. I do get some help from time to time from some other great people, like Yusu Kim, my buddy, also known as Good Son, the musician who crafted that intro that you heard just before here. It's been the theme song of this podcast ever since I launched a few years ago, and got to hang out with my buddy Yusu not too long ago, and he and his wife Joanna are actually expecting. Their son is going to be arriving in the world. He's due anyway at the end of this month, November. So congratulations, Yusu and Joanna. Really can't wait to meet him, and I'm really happy for you guys. Looking forward to all the joys that you guys have that Gretchen and I have just been experiencing with Violet. I have talked on the show before about, some of the struggles of new parenting and some of the things I've been dealing with, but I'll tell you, it's just been so joyous to every day kind of wake up in the morning and just, be woken up by the various noises that Violet's been making. And, when I open the door to her nursery and she kind of recognizes me, just seeing her smile and react in an excited fashion. There's really nothing like it in the world. And no matter what else is going on in the day, no matter what else is going on in the news or my life or anything that might kind of drag you down, even something as big as a presidential election, all that stuff just melts away. And you're just kind of get lost in the child's eyes and their smile, and all you want to do is just keep that going and do whatever you can for them. And so that's been really magical. And I will say, though, as a parent who is still puffing, as a stoner parent here, there have been some unique challenges that I've been facing, at least unique in my estimation. I don't know if others around, who have parented, if others who are still cannabis users as parents have been kind of running into this as well. But I think you'll get what I mean when I play some audio for you here. Violet has been exploring her vocal range lately. She's been making different sounds with her voice and screaming, squealing, doing all this. A lot of them are, happy sounds, but, also when she's crying or when she's frustrated, she'll kind of really squeeze her vocal cords and, just make all these different noises. She's just exploring her range, and that's been fun to listen to, but there have also been some surprises, as anyone who, deals with kids knows that there are plenty of those, but there have been some surprises with these noises that she's been making, and some of them include growling. She's been doing like these little growls on occasion. Not really like she's angry. It's more like she's just, playing with toys, or she's hyped up. She's amped watching the cat jump across the bed or scatter after she makes a little scream, and she'll kind of do like these growls. But here is what I'm talking about. This is what I've been, hearing when I get into the nursery or when I'm just outside of it on a given morning. Yeah, so while she was doing it the other day, I turned on the mic here and I set it to record, and I, brought her over to this little booth where I'm doing the podcast, and I wanted to see if I could get some of that audio for you. And so I finally did and was able to, and yeah, I just want you to picture this. The first time I heard this, I was coming back into our building, into the condo from smoking a joint outside. So it was my first of the day. I was quite stoned from it. It's evening time. She's just been put down. And so I get into our room here. I get into our unit, and Gretchen is downstairs doing some laundry. And so I walk in, I move to the kitchen, I get myself some water, and I am just red-eyed, 1,000-yard stare, completely off in my own world, 30 Seconds to Mars, all that whole thing. I'm just completely stoned. And then, for the first time, without any warning, I hear this through the door to my daughter's nursery. Yeah. That's what I heard over and over again. And I just immediately thought of Gozer from Ghostbusters. We watched Gremlins near Halloween, and so I've been kind of calling her that because to me that definitely sounds like a gremlin. But it's been kind of cracking Gretchen and I up. It's been pretty funny to just hear that random noise pop up around the house. She'll be making breakfast, or, I will be just coming in for a workout or whatever, and all of a sudden... So that's been really fun for us to just kind of get used to. One of the many, many surprises that parenthood can throw your way, and I've really been enjoying that. So I hope you did too. And I'm gonna leave that on the shortcuts of my Rodecaster here, in case somebody says something that I disagree with, or if there's something that I'm reacting to negatively, or somebody that I feel needs to be put in their place or whatever. We'll growl at them. That's what we do here now on the Cannabis Man podcast. Moving on, we're going to hit the news joint wrap now. This is a wrap-up of news stories and events relating to cannabis in or around Illinois, and it's all curated for you by IllinoisNewsJoint.com. It's the joint you can hit for all your Illinois cannabis news and reviews. And some of those recent reviews include Wild Berry Guava Agua Fresca Shot by CQ, Chimera Moon Dust Infused Shake by Caviar, Roll Baby Roll and Going Down Oral Elixir Infused Oils by Ooh Yes, and Night Blueberry Sublingual Strips by High Five. A recent news story published by Jason Brown, who curates a lot of the good work they do at Illinois News Joint. He put an article out here earlier this week on Monday the 4th. Illinois appoints Medical Cannabis Advisory Board Chair and Vice Chair. The officer of the governor sent 2 letters to Alexei Janulius informing the Secretary of State that 2 new appointments have been designated to the MCAB. Governor J.B. Pritzker appointed a new chair and vice chair, and in the letter that Pritzker sent, he says that he appointed current board member Dr. Leslie Mendoza Temple as the chair, and in another letter, Pritzker appointed current board member Jim Champion as vice chair. Those 2 positions had to be filled by law. As Jason Brown notes, board chair is a position Temple's familiar with. She served as chair for Illinois' first Medical Cannabis Advisory Board. Champion served as the veterans representative for the first board and current board. The appointment is the first time Champion's been appointed to a position on that board. So I have linked this article below. Feel free to check out the rest of it for yourself. Always good details provided by Jason Brown and the rest of the great team he has at IllinoisNewsJoint.com. Now I'd like to get into my products of the week, highlight some cannabis products I've been using for you, and tell you about my experiences with them. One of them is a drink that I'm not going to get into right now. I am going to tell you about these, but they've just arrived, so I'm kind of trying trying them for the first time, but I just cracked it open and I wanted to cheers you because it's been a rough week. I don't know where you're at, but I'm recording this on Thursday, November 7th, and it's just been kind of a long, sluggish week around here. So whatever you're doing, whoever you're with, and wherever you are, I hope you're able to enjoy yourself, stay lifted with some lovely cannabis products, and enjoy the good stuff that life has to offer. Cheers. So good. So good. Now, the products that I really want to dive into here are some gummies from OGeez. My guest today is the CEO of OGeez, Bran Noonan, and we're going to get into the formulas and the philosophies behind these gummies and kind of the journey that the company went on. Bran has a really fascinating story to tell, but in terms of the product reviews, I've talked about some other OGeez gummies here as well as on the Weekly Chronic, but the pack I want to tell you about today is called the Creams. Now, this is kind of a multi-pack from OGeez gummies. Mellow Indica flavoring life is what's labeled on the front end here, and the creams that are referenced, the gummies flavors that are in this package include orange cream, blackberries and cream, and peaches and cream. And I gotta tell you, the cream parts of these gummies, OGeez has a variety of different gummies to offer, but the creams that they have, you heard me talk about strawberry and cream, the CBD, kind of a mellow, balanced gummy. These indica creams, the flavor is unique and it's fantastic. My favorite of these three, I would have to say, would be, it's kind of a tie between blackberries and peaches and cream. The blackberries and cream, definitely a little bit darker color, definitely sweeter. It gives you that berry flavor, but the cream is consistent through all of these, same as the strawberries and cream that OGeez offers in the CBD gummies. But the flavor of the cream on these gummies is really something special, and I think it makes these stand out on the dispensary shelves next to other products. Some of the ingredients included in these OGeez gummies are cane sugar, along with gelatin, natural flavors, citric acid, and some others. The cane sugar does make a difference. They use that in all of their gummies, including the RSO. Nutrition facts on the creams multi-pack include 15 calories for one gummy, 0 fat, saturated or trans, no cholesterol, sodium. The carbohydrates come almost entirely from the sugar, which includes 2 grams of added sugars. No protein or vitamins listed on here either. But 15 calories for a gummy, just, something to keep in mind. Don't pop the entirety of them. They also, for what it's worth, have 10 milligrams of THC per gummy, and you get 10 in the pack. So this pack has 100 milligrams of THC inside of it. And then because it's the multi-pack, you get 3 at least of all the flavors and an added one, which in my case, I believe was an extra peaches and cream. Hard to go wrong with peaches and cream. It's a delectable flavor. It's sweet, and then you get that cream on top of it. This pack of the creams from OGeez was easily my favorite. And, in terms of the feelings of the Mellow Indica, they're all pretty much the same. Orange, blackberry, and peaches and cream. You get from all of them a nice mellow vibe. About 30 minutes after taking the gummy, you settle in, you kind of feel it in your body. I felt it radiate out from my sternum like I often do, and then it kind of spread into my lower back and my legs, and then it was just kind of a nice, easy vibe. I didn't really feel like doing much of anything. I didn't really feel like getting up from the couch. Now, I wasn't glued to the couch. It's not like I was prevented from doing things. I was just definitely vibing a nice, easy afternoon, and that's where I feel like these Mellow Indicas are perfect. If maybe you're outside with some friends enjoying a fall evening around a bonfire, these would be great for that. Just kind of glue yourself into the chair around the fire and enjoy some of that good company. Maybe you've got an off day and it's a nice afternoon where you've done some work in the morning and you get off early. These would be perfect for that. But I'm a big fan of the cream angle that these OGeez gummies have. And it's hard for me to say that you'd go wrong with any of these flavors, but the blackberries and cream and the peaches and cream specifically, I give those each a 9 out of 10, and the only reason it's 9 is because the OGeez gummies have these sugar granules from the cane sugar that they use, which makes the flavor really good, but it's a lot of sugar granules for me, for my personal taste, and they're a little distracting from the fruit and cream flavor, and that's why I'm giving it a 9 out of a 10. But I really liked the vibe, the experience, and the taste from these gummies is just perfect. 10 milligrams is a nice, easy, sweet spot. You can dose up from there if you want to, but try out the blackberries and cream and the peaches and cream from the OGeez Mellow Indica Creams multi-pack. Let me know what you think about them. Send a text to Cannabis Man in the link below in the description notes. Before I move on to the interview, listener, I did want to tell you that I've got to clear something up. There's another product that I have been kind of getting into throughout this week, and I sort of reviewed it a couple weeks ago, but I made a mistake. This is one of the many wonderful products from Sweet Buzz. I interviewed Elisa Brill on the show a while back. If you haven't heard that, go back and check it out. What they're doing at Sweet Buzz is amazing. I have been getting through their multi-pack of the different cups options they have. Their peanut butter cups. I reviewed those on the Weekly Chronic recently, and I talked about their signature sweet, the Sweet Sparks. It is a cannabis-infused chocolate candies. It's basically Sweet Buzz's take on an M&M. It's a tiny little 1 milligram piece of candy with chocolate in the center and a candy shell wrapped around it. The mistake that I made that I'm correcting is that the Sweet Sparks that I told you about were actually Sweet Sparks After Dark, which is an R&D product that Sweet Buzz is going to be releasing soon, but I don't know that those are on shelves yet. And those were the purple-colored sort of M&M candies from Sweet Buzz. They have CBN in them, and so they're meant as a kind of a sleep aid to take later in the evening. And Gretchen's been using them as her first foray back into edibles since, getting pregnant and then birthing Violet. She hasn't really had a lot of wine or alcohol or any edibles since then, and she has been enjoying some of these Sweet Sparks with me. And she's been taking the After Dark CBN Sweet Sparks, the purple shells, to kind of get down at the end of the evening, and she's really, really been enjoying them. I have too. But these base level ones, the Sweet Sparks without CBN, the regular ones, these have a hot pink shell to them, sort of a bright neon pink, and they look like pink M&Ms, and they have 1 milligram of THC each, so it's very easy to dose upward. If you take 1 and it's not enough, you can take 2 or 3. I've been popping like 4 or 5 of these in the evenings, and it's been really, really wonderful. So I just wanted to say the Sweet Buzz Sweet Sparks, if you go to a dispensary and you're looking for the Sweet Sparks, look for the pink shells. Those are the baseline 1 milligram of THC, and there's no CBN in those. They're delicious. My thoughts on them still are, remain the same from the After Darks. They're delicious. They're a great take on the M&M. I love the infusion. You can taste it a little bit after the bite, but it's mainly the chocolate that remains on the tongue as kind of the aftertaste. The chocolate's delicious. The Sweet Buzz people are candy people, and so the candies they make, the sweets they're doing, are just as good as anything else on the shelf that you would get candy-wise, plus you get the infusion. They're getting into this cannabis game now, and all of us get to benefit. So head to GetSweetBuzz.com, check out the store locator, and find out where these Sweet Sparks, the pink ones, are nearest you, and look out for the After Darks, which are the purple shells, and have some CBN, and you can check those out too as kind of a sleep aid once those hit stores. And speaking of stores, I don't know if you've done this yet, but if you haven't, you really need to get on top of it because there is a rewards app out there, and it's the only one for cannabis purchases you will ever need. I'm talking about High Rewards. These are the guys that made an app, and it's really helping all of us out. I'm sure you, like I have signed up for a ton of loyalty programs over the last few years. Seems like every restaurant, every store has one. Every company is trying to get you to share your data and kind of rack up points with the purchases. Well, what's great about High Rewards is that no matter which dispensary you're going to, no matter which product you're buying, all of it will go into High Rewards and you'll get points for it. You download the app, and you can do so below at the link that I've shared. Download the app on your Apple or Android smartphone. Create a profile, input your name, input your location, email, and password, and now your profile is up and running. And the next time you go into a dispensary, before you buy anything, before you have spent a dime, Open the High Rewards app and check in just for being there, and you will get points, which have real cash value. Then, when you go to the counter and you buy your weed from the bud tender, scan your receipt into the High Rewards app, and you'll get more points. Then after a few visits, watch that stash add up, and you can use your points for dispensary purchases. You can actually go into the app and you can select, let's say you're at Sunnyside in Wrigleyville like I go to. You can select an eighth or a pre-roll or another product like an edible or a beverage. You can select it through High Rewards and you can use your points to buy them. So this is real cash value here that you can get just by visiting dispensaries, and you can get them other ways too, by taking surveys and watching videos and inviting your friends to use it, or playing mobile games. There's a lot of ways that you can earn rewards and points in the High Rewards app. And if you're not doing it yet, you're really just missing out, because I've already bought some products from Sunnyside using my points in High Rewards. If you download the app using the link below, input the promo code CANMAN, CANNMAN, and you'll get $5 in your stash. So download the High Rewards app, use the promo code CANMAN for $5, and watch that stash build, because hey, you're already getting high, you might as well get highly rewarded too. Listener, I am very excited to bring you this conversation with my guest today. There is a brand that has been around for a while, and it's now available in Illinois. And I love the name of their brand for a few different reasons. The name is OGeez. And first of all, I think it gets to, referencing the OGeez of cannabis. Now that it's becoming legal, as I talk about all the time, there's a lot of talk about who the OGeez in the cannabis space are, meaning the older gentlemen or what have you, the people who have been in this space since well before it became legalized, and those who were growing their products, those who were maybe selling it to other people, but those who were getting a feel for this cannabis, landscape well before it was popular or even legal to do. And then the other side of it that I think of when I hear OGeez is kind of the Midwestern niceness that I hear a lot from my family up in Milwaukee, here around Chicago, my friends in Minneapolis, all around the upper Midwest and Canada. There is this sort of OGeez, expression that is said, whether you're bumping into somebody or you're just kind of, having a thought that hits you at one time or another. So I love the brand name of OGeez, and I love their gummies because they have a very specific and interesting formula, and they have a lot of different options in terms of what you might be looking to feel at any one time. And I was able to try some of these, and I'm looking forward to sharing my thoughts with you about them. But for now, let's talk with the CEO of OGeez Brands, Bran Noonan. Welcome, Bran. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Talking about OGeez, I don't know if that introduction was at all unfair or on the mark of what you guys were going for, but when I read it for the first time, those were the two things I kind of thought of, the dual meaning of the OGeez in the space as well as the Midwestern, kind of, oh shucks, sorry about that. Sorry, as the Canadians might say. But what was the initial, impetus for starting this brand, let's say? How did you get into the cannabis brand here?
Great question. Just on a side note, it's funny, I was in the airport coming from Arizona to actually Chicago, and I had one of my OGeez shirts on, and somebody just tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Where did you get that shirt? Where did you get that shirt?" I just, said it was from a company shirt, and they were like, "Oh, I'm from Minnesota. My husband says OGeez all the time," and it's just so it's learning it. It's part of the lexicon of that Midwest. That was very sweet. I say it's a great question because for a couple of reasons. One, the origin of the name is actually lost in time, right? And it kind of takes so the answer to that, to the origin, kind of takes you into how I got into this business altogether, which ultimately my mom starts this company. She is an OG, right? She gets into cannabis in 2014 in Arizona. Early days of cannabis, when the raw material they're using is still flour, and they're cooking it in butter,
sure,
and making it the old-fashioned way, right? And that was a time when edibles are still new, and the issues of consistency and potency are still an issue. And that changes eventually when distillate oil hits the market, and you can use that as the raw material and really start dosing more accurately and so forth. But in 2018, so those early days, my mother was making pesto and pasta sauce and peanut butter. She was really just experimenting, and she was a real child of the 60s. And so she had, this was in her blood. She really believed in the medicinal and experiential effects of cannabis. So she was really excited to get into it because she was building restaurants at the time. And so she thought she could actually parlay that experience and build a manufacturing facility because she knew how to build an actual commercial kitchen. So she built one of the early kitchens in Arizona. But in 2018, she starts feeling like they see the gummies kind of taking off in the marketplace, but she just feels like the gummies on the market weren't they were subpar for what she was looking for. She wanted something that was, because the consumption experience with the gummy is so quick, it happens instantaneously. Where inhalants are longer, they're more ritualistic, they're more shareable at times in ways. But the gummy is just it's like poof, it's gone. And so she was like, if you're going to have this consumption moment, it needs to be kicked off with this kind of a memorable experience. And she was like, I want a mouth-watering, flavorful gummy with a fantastic texture. And so that's what kind of kicked off the creation of OGeez. But the name itself, the sad thing is it's lost in time in a way, because ultimately she passes away in 2021, and that's when I come in and take on the company and lead it forward. But we don't know. We have, it's lost in time, unfortunately. The name's origin, how they decided the name, how they came up with the logo. I've tried to figure it out and talking to a lot of people, but haven't. There's some urban legends in the company, but
I bet
I don't know which one's correct, if any.
Hey, no, you know what? That's actually, I get that, and it's really cool story that you just shared about your mom, Peggy, by the way, their brand, because I think that is really, really cool. There's a family connection there, and as you said, she is an OG, and as you told me before we started recording, this is not the Peggy Noonan of the Wall Street Journal or the Reagan speechwriter. This is a different Peggy Noonan.
That's right.
So different person, but a trailblazer in the cannabis space, somebody starting, doing this back in 2014 in Arizona. I just love that. And her kind of making the prescient choice of not just, looking to grow flower, but the ability, growing her own, strength and training in making, edibles at a time when, as you mentioned, the dosing, the taste, all those things were not uniform at all. Those of us, who are OGs, who remember before it was legal, man, you might have one neighbor who makes brownies and you'd have 2 or 3 of them and barely feel something. Then you have another neighbor who makes a batch of cookies and you take half of one and you're completely out of sorts for the entirety of the evening. You just blast off. So that the uniformity of the experience, as you said, it was not there at all. And it seemed like your mom was already thinking about how to make that possible to recreate.
She wasn't an inhaler, right? She wasn't a smoker. She didn't consume. I mean, she while that's the original primary delivery method, and so she used it.
Yeah.
But when she gets into the industry, she's saying, you know what? She was drawn to edibles because she wasn't a smoker, and she was like, I want a form of consumption that I'm not a smoker. I don't like smoking, so that's what she was drawn to.
Yeah, and I love that too, because that's also prescient in another way, because the medical side of cannabis is what kind of got it going in the first place. And as I've talked with people on the show, no doctor is ever going to recommend smoking something. It's just not a whatever we find out about THC, CBD, the burning of plant matter, that combustion, and inhaling it just goes counter to healthy behaviors. And so I think a lot of people gravitated more towards the edibles, the beverages, these gummies, because that method of ingestion, it just leans more toward a healthier lifestyle, whether you exercise or not. I can totally see why that she was thinking that, and I think it's cool. It's also pretty cool that since there is no agreed upon origin story for OGeez, you guys can just pick the best urban legend and then lean into that. You know what I mean? Like, just take your choice and then just run with it.
Well, I mean, I do think at the heart of things, she understood the concept of what you already described. That name itself has multiple meanings. There's multiple like double entendres. The original gangster origin of that phrase too is a reference to old school, somebody from a historical, knowledgeable background of sorts, right? And that has always had a kind of a cannabis reference, right? OG Kush,
Totally
strain, right? And so the phrase of OGeez has always had cannabis kind of referencing to it, and I do believe that had to play into it in some form or another.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, and I appreciate you clarifying that. Original gangster is definitely the actual, I think, what the OG is meant to stand for. Older gentleman, I'm not sure where that came from. My wife's been watching Bridgerton and such. I don't know how that bleeded into my lexicon, but it's definitely original gangster, and I love that OGeez kind of references that, because as you said, it is big in cannabis. There's a lot of that respect for the people who were fighting the prohibition more on the front lines when it, as we said, this has been going on for 50 years in its modern iteration anyway, and goes back to 1937, well before that. But you just look at the last 50 years since the 70s with Nixon and all that, and that original idea of pressing it down and the DARE educations, the DEA and all these things. I think that there's a lot of respect for the people, the true OGeez who were growing, who were selling, who, like your mom, were experimenting and making some of these products all at a time when it was much less friendly or much less cool in terms of what law enforcement was doing, what the administrations who were in power were saying. It was very much sort of a counterculture. A rebellion is baked into, I think, cannabis and its story, its origin story, and it seems like your mom was right there with it.
Well, I mean, if you High Times reported on it, there was a article in Bloomberg this many years ago, but her origin really dates back into that mid 60s. By the time of, I think, 1965 or so, she reaches the age of maturity, and she's ultimately ready for the age of Aquarius. And she's from New York City. She rebels against her 1950s parents. She goes out to the University of Arizona, and she doesn't actually go. She kind of doesn't really go to school there. She winds up getting starts running pot across the border.
Wow.
Back then, and so much so that she gets caught at the border. She winds up getting sentenced to 2 years in a prison in Mexico.
Oh my gosh.
Spends 6 months in a prison in 1967. And I mean that, and so she from a criminal justice standpoint too, she was involved in those years as well, because you're talking about the Nixon time, and then it flows right up into that time.
Wow. So even before that, that's incredible, man, that she's, and again, that's another level of, we're talking about the rebellion and the respect that is owed to people working in that time. That's something that kids today, which I think it's ultimately a good thing, the normalization as it's come. My wife and I just had a daughter in April. She's going to grow up in a world where cannabis is much more normalized than it was even for me back in the 90s and 2000s and whatnot. But for people like your mom, who were literally, these kids have no idea of how anti the establishment was toward cannabis then, that someone, spent that amount of time in jail for just running it across the border. And obviously, we're still in this patchwork legalization. There are still states where it is not okay to run it through there. I've run into people who, they drive from Illinois up to Michigan or to Ohio or whatever, and if they get stopped in Indiana, they're getting booked for moving it because it's not legal there. Same in Wisconsin. And so this pushback is very much still there. The prohibition, the propaganda, the stigma, as I talk about a lot on the show, is still alive and well. And that's why I think that there's an inherent respect for people who were fighting this fight as long ago, back in the 60s, like your mom, Peggy Noonan, was. That's an incredible story, Bran, really.
Well, I mean, I love your generational kind of focus right there, because you're right. She's rebelling against in 1950s and 40s and earlier, but that is a strict kind of period to be doing that. And when I'm growing up, I'm in my high school years, I'm in my early 20s, and I was a consumer back then, much more than until then I grew up and became a lawyer. And but I'm back to a more active consumption. But when I was young, I was still, it was still something that you had to do in a very it was still felt you were doing something criminal of sorts. You were doing something that seemed wrong, even though my mother was from a rebellious generation. So I agree, my kids now are going to be just like yours, this first generation that is going to see cannabis completely different. Like, because I work at a cannabis company, I talk about it in front of my kids. I educate them about what we're doing here, right? And so to them, it's nothing. Cannabis doesn't mean anything like the way it used to be. And that's what we try to do from a branding standpoint, ultimately. Like, when I took over the company, our original logo had a pot leaf on it. Now, I felt it was time to remove that. I felt like it left a stigmatized impression, because ultimately I wanted to take this brand and actually do traditional CPG style branding and marketing and inject it into the cultural kind of just mainstream milieu at the end of the day. But what I did keep as a kind of a signifier of who we are is our brand comes with a drop, and to me that's the modern representation of who we are today. It's the distillate drop. It's the oil that we use, and so that is our signifier. That is one of our kind of forms of expression, using that drop as well as just the name. Yeah,
that's really cool, and it makes a lot of sense, because I'm on the website OGeezBrands.com, listener. That's OGeez brands.com if you want to check this out. But those drops that you mentioned, Bran, are right here front and center. And what's cool, and I was able to try the gummies, was really, really happy with what I experienced. But I just want to say the flavors right off the bat to you, that was something that really stood out to me. And I was trying these, and I got to try like the blackberries and cream, the strawberries and cream, the aquaberry, as well as the watermelon and the red apple, which all of these are, the flavor is... It's consistent in its quality, but they're different across the gummies. And I think, to your point about the drop, that distillate oil you guys are using, that obviously is having an effect on the flavor profile of your gummies.
Yeah, I mean, I will say this, this is what my mother envisioned originally. There was a lot, she didn't want the bitter aftertaste to be what you were left with. She wanted you to be left with that enjoyable kind of just flavor forward kind of memory, and so when I took over, we tried to identify who we were and communicate in some kind of brand essence type of, and that's where we came up with flavoring life ultimately, right? Because that's what we are, flavor first, and how we approach things, and that's what the effect is meant to be. It's meant to flavor your life with this kind of like enliven it, and so. Everything we do, we kind of think of ourselves as gummy nerds. Like, we live and breathe gummies, right? And to us, it might be easy. It's easy to make a gummy. It's really hard to make a good gummy.
Yeah.
And to make an infused gummy, that you are now battling a raw material that's nature is bitterness, right? And where the product is meant to be flavorful. So it's a crazy conflict that you deal with as the manufacturer. But one of you mentioned the blackberries and creams. That was one of their first products, and it just blew up because nobody has yet to even do it today. A double layer gummy where the flavors are concentrated into two layers instead of being blended together, and so it creates a different kind of consumption experience when you're biting into it.
100%, and I'm so glad you put it that way, because I was running into trouble trying to describe it. I'm doing these reviews for different stuff and trying more edibles than I ever have in my life, which is easily the best homework I've ever had. I'm not complaining,
Right.
But on that note, so I'm trying all these gummies and stuff, and something that I have really noticed is how many of them have that sort of cannabinoid aftertaste. It's hard to describe, but it's almost, you know it when you taste it. It was there a lot in those those years past with when the neighbor would make their brownies or the cookies. There was like a zing of cannabis. You could taste the infusion. And there are a lot of gummies today that have that. But these OGeez gummies, especially the cream flavors, I mentioned, as I said, the blackberries and cream, the strawberries and cream. What I noticed with those is the color. You pick up the gummy and you see the different, colors on the top end of the fruit and the bottom end with the cream. It reminded me of the classic, like Halloween candies, the gummy rings, the sharks, those kind of things. And those already kind of, whenever the sight and the smell informs the taste. And so that put my mind in this place where I was ready to kind of enjoy this classic Halloween candy from when I was a kid. So the sight does it justice as well. Then you taste it, and for me, I was so impressed with the lack of the infused aftertaste. What the aftertaste I got was the cream, and that's something I was so impressed with.
Yeah, no, and it's one of my favorites at the end of the day. That cream experience. I mean, and that's what she wanted to do, and that's what we continue to carry on. How do we achieve a delivery that is memorable, right? At the end of the day, that leaves you excited about your consumption experience. Not like, oh, I just have to eat this thing and get through this thing.
Right.
And we get people beg us for the non-infused, the non-medicated. They just want the gummies. And so a year ago, we were like, all right, we just start pumping out non-meds because people want to eat more than one at the end of the day. And so we pump them out and just hand them out wherever we go.
We've talked about the flavor a little bit here, but the texture, I want to tell you this as well. They were very soft, and in a way that was not off-putting. Sometimes you get a soft gummy that's like too flaccid. It's just like, you feel like it's going to like melt into liquid in your hand or something. These were not at that level, but they were a lot softer than some of the other gelatin gummies that I've had and chewed on and stuff. So that biting in to a soft gummy from OGeez, even the texture alongside the taste is memorable. I love that.
I'm so glad you brought it up because, we think flavor, we talk flavor, it's flavoring life, it's flavorful, right? And usually when you're thinking of your consumption experience, you're thinking the flavor experience you had. But it is the texture, really, at the end of the day, that combined with the flavor that complements each other, right? If you have a hard textured gummy, that flavor might not carry the experience for you. If you have a soft, a really good texture but bad flavor, that's having both of them combined was what was so critical. Having what we say is this soft, bouncy kind of delicious gummy that is a lasting consumption experience. I don't know how it felt for you, but we find that people report that when they eat it continues, and they notice various moments through that while they're eating it. There's almost levels of the experience that they're having because of the softness and how it just kind of eventually dissolves as they're eating it, versus a hard gummy or a sweaty gummy or something. Yeah,
no, sweaty gummy is a hilarious name for anything, but it's I'm glad you put it that way too, because I did have levels to my experience as well. I mean, not just the effects that I felt from the gummies, because those are pronounced as well. There was the on the website you can explore by effect. Listener, if you're somebody who's not maybe as turned on by flavors, if you're looking for a specific effect like focus, chill, more therapeutic, or sleepy. I tried the aquaberries last night before going to bed, and it was like, an hour later, I was so ready to just go down and didn't have any problem sleeping through the night, even with the, 4.5-month-old, nearby. It was like, as a newer parent, it was really welcome to me to be able to sleep the 7.5 hours through the night without any issues after taking the aquaberry gummy. But the other parts of my day yesterday, I spent taking other ones, like the CBD chill and relaxing one. And then the other one I got was like a more focus and creative one. I found that they all had distinctive feelings aside from the taste profile and the texture. I was experiencing increasing levels as 1 hour went by, as 2 hours went by, and then 3. And then I could kind of time out when I was consuming the next gummy. And it really led me to having a really pleasant day. Kind of started around noon. This is a Sunday that, I'm talking about here. It was like there was football on. I did the stuff that I wanted to do in the morning. And then it was like I took the first gummy at noon, and then every 2-3 hours I took the next one. And I was able to just ride this really pleasant, kind of journey across the effects, tasting different flavors. And it led to a really wonderful Sunday is what I'm trying to say.
I mean, that's the cannabis experience right there, right? I mean, it's funny, I was talking about this the other day with my wife. Like, we just have cut down on drinking alcohol. And I was never a big drinker, and I have nothing against drinking alcohol. It's nothing about that. But
right.
I just, inebriation, I don't get that kind of inebriation from the cannabis experience.
No, not at all.
Especially when I have a variety of different types of products available that can fulfill a certain experiential effect and need at a given time, right? And so it is what you're describing. It is this new benefit of cannabis that's really we're just like on the experiencing the fruits of today, like this. And this is the best part about edibles, particularly, right? The ability to take these minor cannabinoids and really blend them together, and then take different extraction methods, whether it's distillate oil or RSO or live rosin or live resin, and create different gummies that provide for different types of effects for different things you may need in your life, right? And our main goal is looking at what the mass market is looking for. What do the general consumers need in their life? Do they need some general therapeutic relief? Well, we want to be able to provide that, whether it's our RSO or our Happy Balance CBD ratio gummy. And so we're always trying to figure out how to take all of these new great ingredients that are available for edibles, these minor cannabinoids, CBD, CBG, CBC, and provide the best types, the best gummies that, whether it's if people want flavor, they want the effect, they want the combo of both.
Yeah, and Bran, it's you guys, I will say, just having tried them myself, like, you guys have succeeded in that. And as you talked about relating it to alcohol, this comes up on the show a lot. It's just it's a natural progression, it seems like, that where cannabis is legalized, they've shown studies, multiples now, that have confirmed this true. Where cannabis is legalized, drinking rates just go down. And this is why, the alcohol industry is, I'm from Wisconsin. I have a lot of family up there. I love going up there and enjoying my time. There's always a new bar, always a new restaurant. Drinking culture is very heavy in Wisconsin, and I am convinced, this is just my personal opinion, but after, doing the show as long as I have, talking with people, I'm convinced that the reason Wisconsin has resisted the new revenue that awaits them if they were to legalize cannabis is because the alcohol industry is so strong there, has such like a big foundation, that they are not yet, that the lobbyists and everybody else the money is very much being invested to keep that from happening. But to your point, the spectrum that is there for drinkers, when you're talking about, okay, if I'm having a Sunday, if I want to start my drinking in the daytime, if it's going to be a seltzer or a margarita or whatever, maybe you're a dark liquor drinker in the daytime, but for me, if I do that at noon, I'm asleep by 3 p.m. And then it's kind of like you go hard liquor and then maybe change to beer later on. We have these kind of rules for helping behavior, but my point is that spectrum of alcohol drinking experience is much, much more limited than the spectrum of effects from cannabis and cannabinoids. You mentioned, Bran, the minor cannabinoids that are out there. There's all this talk now about CBG. There was just a study I did on last week's episode, or I read through, that had to do with its effects on anxiety and stress and even verbal memory. They're all positive effects, and they're going to do more studies of that. THCV, they're talking about energy and appetite suppression. CBN, which obviously the Aquaberry sleep gummies are enhanced with. CBN is really helpful for getting to sleep. And so these minor cannabinoids and how they can affect us specifically, these new edibles, the stuff that you guys are offering, and the abilities of products to use them for people to kind of have the effects that they're exactly going after, and not necessarily getting some tag-along, intoxication. But that is really what's exciting, and especially when you factor them into products like the gummies at OGeez.
Yeah, and then there's a whole big discussion about pharmaceuticals too, right? If it's right, if it's the alcohol, the pharmaceuticals, and how cannabis at the end of the day is coming in and really shaking that up and providing a whole new avenue for folks to explore and see if their needs can be met through this plant that is growing out of the earth. And it has all these various opportunities that we're still exploring, and potentially allows for people to get their needs met, whether it's a therapeutic need or it's just experiential, social,
Totally. And filling that void, where when I talk about this on the show too, when people sort of do give up alcohol, they don't necessarily want to go full sober. It's not a matter of choosing, right, okay, I'm going to hang out with people, but it's not that I don't want anything to take the edge off. I just don't want alcohol specifically, whether it's the inebriation, whether it's the hangovers, whatever it is, there are reasons why people turn away from it, but that doesn't mean they want nothing. They still want like a little, social lubricant. They want something that'll help them relax at the end of the day, or the medicinal stuff like body pain, stress, getting to sleep, and all that. It is a very exciting time, and I wanted to ask Bran. This is, believe me, I love these conversations. I can talk all day, but I want to let people know your OGeez are here in Illinois now. What other states can people find you in?
So we were homegrown in Arizona, and we just launched in Illinois. We are launching in New Jersey this month, and we are aiming to launch in Massachusetts either Q4 or Q1 next year. Just all depends on regulatory approvals. And that was the our first stage of expansion, those three states. And so after that, we'll look into the next stage in 2025. There's a lot of opportunity out there, with Ohio, that's new. Maryland, is pretty new. It's just remains always exciting. I think the momentum is in favor of moving in the direction of full legalization across the country, whether it's a state by state basis. Eventually, the federal government will follow, but right now it's state by state, which is fine. I'm okay with that.
Bran, don't discount Germany and some of these other countries out there outside the U.S. because Uruguay, exactly. And then, of course, Thailand is kind of flip-flopping, but I hear that they're going back toward legal now, which, offers some opportunity there as well. It's the excitement, the opportunities there here in the United States, but also countries around the world. The word is out, the secret's out, that cannabis can really help people's lives. And it's something that, your mom Peggy obviously discovered so many years ago. And it's just so cool that you're carrying forward her legacy with OGeez brands and bringing these excellent, stellar gummies to states and countries around the world. People should definitely try these out. CEO of OGeez, Bran Noonan, thanks a lot for stopping by today, man.
Thank you for having me.
And there you have it, listener. I want to thank one more time my guest, Bran Noonan, CEO of OGeez Gummies, as well as their other products. And some news out of OGeez just this week. They sent an email, and you can sign up for their newsletter at the website that Bran and I were discussing. But the news out of the company from the dispatch here is something that Bran had mentioned to me while we were doing the interview, the possibility of a no-sugar gummy coming out from OGeez. Well, that is now available in Arizona stores. This is a tropical medley flavored bag. It includes strawberry kiwi, watermelon guava, and passion fruit mango gummies, and they'll be exclusively available at True Leaves 21 Arizona locations for the next month, and then it'll be on dispensary shelves throughout Arizona, and Bran assured me that they would make their way to Illinois and New Jersey eventually as well. So if you're like me and the sugar granules you find a little distracting, or as much as you love gummies, you're looking for ways to kind of cut sugar out of your life or maybe just limit it. If it's something like you want the CBN gummies for a sleep aid, taking in sugar is not necessarily the best complement to that. So if you're looking for one of these things but the sugar's not for you, OGeez has you covered now with sugar-free gummies, and I can't wait to try some of these. I will certainly be reviewing those on the podcast when I get them as well. And hey, you may remember some audio I played from Snoop Dogg a couple weeks back. He was on Bravo with Andy Cohen talking about how he has a chaperone of sorts on his staff so that anybody he's smoking with, this chaperone lets them know
that's enough.
In his words, he tells you when you've had enough weed so that you don't get too high and too ridiculous, and you can go home and still have a nice day and all of that. Plus, as we all must understand by now, Snoop's tolerance is God level. It is if you're smoking with him, if you're lucky enough to sort of be in that entourage, you need somebody there to tell you
that's enough.
Because otherwise you're just going to go too far and you might have trouble finding your way back. So I just wanted to let you know that I have that audio now saved to my little shortcuts here. And anytime I feel like it's time to move on, or maybe I just get a little mental note from the godfather of weed himself, Mr. D-O-G-G, he will let us all know that
that's enough.
And it's time to move on. As it is right now, 2 news stories which I think are worth your attention, one of which it has to do with a state that had a cannabis amendment on the ballot. And this was the biggest one of this election cycle. That would be Florida, which, as you may know by now, failed that threshold. Florida did not legalize recreational cannabis this week. Florida does have a medical program, but they did not green light recreational cannabis for adult users down there. But the story that I want to share with you is an article from USA Today. They specify that the amendment for cannabis was approved by more than 50% of voters in Florida, but it failed. Why did that happen? Now, this came out earlier in the week after the election, and as the USA Today article goes on, I've linked it below, by the way, so you can follow along or check it out for yourself. But as it goes on, it says, after months of legal battles, campaigns, and a full court press against it by Governor Ron DeSantis, the recreational marijuana amendment appears to have failed to pass. Recreational weed remains illegal in Florida. But it got 55.9% of the vote, according to the unofficial returns as of Wednesday morning. So, USA Today asks the question, why wasn't that good enough? And what they go on to explain is that Florida added a higher threshold for amendment approval back in 2006. This was through a constitutional amendment, which passed and changed the threshold for voter approval to 60%. Ironically, as the article notes, it passed with only 57.78% of the vote, one of the last amendments that will ever do so in the state. So if people are wondering why Florida didn't pass recreational cannabis with over 50% appearing to vote for it, that is why. Because in Florida, after 2006, you need 60% approval in order to amend the state's constitution. Lower in the article, medical cannabis and the conditions that would qualify you to be prescribed it in Florida, USA Today has included some of those conditions, which include cancer, epilepsy, glaucoma, and several others. So you can check out the rest of this article and get a little context there. It is linked below. Now, for the rest of the states that had cannabis initiatives on their ballots this week, let's get into some of those. Normal, whose deputy director, Paul Armentano, I spoke with recently. Love talking with Paul. They sent out a newsletter specifying what went on with each state. So I'm getting this information from that. I've linked it below as well. Nebraska had medical access ballot initiatives, and voters in the state approved 2 separate medical cannabis ballot measures. The first permits qualified patients to possess and use medical cannabis. The second measure regulates the production and distribution of medical cannabis to those authorized patients. Those ballot initiatives passed. Voters in Nebraska did pass those. So, very good news. If you're in Nebraska with certain medical conditions, you can soon qualify for medical cannabis. And I'll get more into those conditions on another episode. The Dakotas, North and South Dakota, had adult use ballot initiatives this week, and voters in each state rejected those measures. So, adult users of cannabis still illegal in the Dakotas. In Kentucky, not for the statewide, but there were some local, various townships in Kentucky, counties and such. They had medical cannabis ballot resolutions, and some of those passed. Voters in 106 Kentucky cities and counties approved local measures in permitting the operation of cannabis businesses in those jurisdictions. And then in Texas, there were a few different local areas that had cannabis ballot initiatives. Bastrop, Dallas, Lockhart, all of those voters in those localities, they voted to pass various cannabis ballot initiatives. In Bastrop, it was a depenalization measure. Same thing in Dallas and Lockhart. But in Lubbock, those voters rejected Proposition A, which was a citizens-initiated measure to depenalize certain cannabis-related offenses. However, as I said, in Lockhart, Dallas, and Bastrop, Texas, those voters did approve those propositions that were on their ballots. And so now, cannabis possession and use has been depenalized, or at least it will be, starting next year when these ballot initiatives take effect. So that's some good news on this election week when people, a lot of people anyway, seem to be kind of spouting doom and gloom stuff, as I know it happens every election, but I gotta say, at least in my circle, a lot of people really seemed like to feel like the world was ending this week, and I just don't share that opinion. You know, I know that the country's been here before, and, you know, even though your guy didn't win, and I wish that American politics weren't the team sport that they are and everybody has to pick a side. I wish it were better than that, but it's not. And so therefore only one side can win it. And for the last, 10, 15 years, as long as I've been an adult able to vote, it seems like every election, this is how it goes. Somebody wins and the other side acts like it's the end of the world. And it is unfortunate, but that's some good news. In terms of cannabis here, we still have the administrative hearing next year. It doesn't matter who's in charge. The DEA is still going through this process of rescheduling. And the pressure to reschedule it is still there because it wasn't necessarily coming from the White House. It was coming from the Justice Department and Health and Human Services, as well as the American people, who every single week seem to be approving legalizing cannabis in greater and greater numbers. So that's something that we can all look forward to in 2025. Something else that I thought was worth bringing to your attention in the news front here. This is from the Associated Press. Company vows to sue over damages after New Mexico authorities destroy cannabis crops. You may remember this story. I shared it on an earlier episode where law enforcement seized legal cannabis product. They took it from a legally operating company down in New Mexico, which legalized cannabis 2 years ago. But those law enforcement officers took refuge under the federal prohibited status of cannabis. That's ultimately what they said. Even though, hey, in New Mexico it's legal, these law enforcement officers said federally it's still not. And so that is what they said allowed them to seize the product, even though it was legal. Well, now, this article goes on to say state police have destroyed tens of thousands of pounds of marijuana plants at greenhouses in northwestern New Mexico, marking what regulators say is the largest seizure and destruction of cannabis in New Mexico since new possession and cultivation laws took effect in 2021, so 3 years ago. Authorities announced the operation Monday of this week. This article came out Tuesday, November 5th, and was published by Susan Montoya Bryan. They said dozens of agents were assigned to eradicate the plants in October, which is when I believe I brought the story up. The State Cannabis Control Division had started the process of revoking the license of NNK Equity LLC, having filed a non-compliance order and a default order earlier this year. The company was accused of not posting its licenses on its site and failing to obtain water rights for cultivation, not having cameras which could monitor certain areas of operation, and violating sanitation and health requirements. State Police Chief Troy Weisler said in a statement, quote, "The organization involved showed a blatant disregard for the laws of this state, and we will prove that once this investigation is over." Meanwhile, an Albuquerque attorney who represents NNK Equity, Jacob Candelaria, disputed the state's claims and accused regulators and state police of violating his client's civil rights. He said the state failed to properly serve notice of its intent to revoke the company's license and subsequently denied a request for hearing on the merits of the case. He said clients Irving Lin and Bao Su spoke Mandarin Chinese and have limited ability to understand the written English language. Lin asked for a Chinese translation, but the attorney said regulators did not respond to his request. The Cannabis Control Division stated in filings related to the case that it complied with notice and hearing requirements and had afforded the company its due process rights. The company plans to ask a state district judge to set aside the order revoking the license and to order state regulators to hold a hearing. He added that NNK Equity also plans to sue the state for destroying what he said amounted to hundreds of thousands of dollars of private property. Quote, "The idea that law enforcement officers can destroy public property based on a temporary restraining order which can be entered without notice to all parties and before a hearing on the evidence, which was the case here, should concern all of us who believe in the Constitution." The article goes on for a little while longer. The story continues. I have linked that below. By all means, read the rest of it for yourself. Fascinating stuff here, but I was thrilled to read that they're planning to sue because, hey, they should. This was one of the possible sort of thresholds, one of the meeting points of this conflict we have between state and federal law enforcement regarding cannabis law. In states like New Mexico, it's legal, but federally, it's still not. So you have this limbo where law enforcement can sometimes try and flex their muscle or do something that they say is still within their federal rights, but concerning state stuff, and in this case of the business private property, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars here in a case where these people, at least according to their lawyer, can't even speak the language. And so these written notices and all this stuff, you have to feel for them, hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage here, that they are likely not able to just immediately recoup and kind of pick up and go forward anyway before all this lawsuit and everything gets settled. And I just hope this serves as an example for other states that have legalized. If federal law enforcement officers, or certainly state patrols, come in and seize your stuff, I'll be interested to see how this lawsuit plays out in court. And that is going to set a precedent for a lot of other states around the country. I'm sure there are companies paying attention to this, as well as law enforcement. And finally, kind of a fun one here that I wanted to share with you. This is from Forbes, and this headline reads, "Cannabis and Professional Pickleball Enter into First Ever Sponsorship Deal." Now, this has to be the most perfect meeting of sport and sponsor, because I haven't played pickleball since high school. My gym teacher, Mr. Klish, instructed us on the game. It's kind of like a mesh between ping pong and tennis. And I enjoyed it, and I can see why it's becoming popular. Definitely an elder-friendly kind of activity. You can still do it as you're aging and whatnot. But for cannabis to be partnering with pickleball, True Leaf Cannabis Corp. Specifically, inking its first cannabis sponsorship deal with professional pickleball leagues, I just think this is absolutely wonderful. I mean, to know that you are about to embark on a competitive event such as pickleball, but be able to say to yourself before the matches start,
I'm getting high on reefer.
Yes, thank you, Niles. That's one of my favorite clips from Frasier. If you haven't watched that, listener, there's an episode in the last season, 11, where Frasier's brother Niles decides to rebel and try cannabis through a brownie the first time, and that's one of the lines in the episode that he's confessing to Frasier his plan to.
I'm getting high on reefer.
And so I just wanted to add that to my my little shortcut buttons of audio here as well. As you can tell, I was playing around with that this week, so now I've got a couple of options to pepper in throughout the show. Really looking forward to adding those to things here. But
that's enough.
Right, back to the article here. Trulieve Cannabis Corp., they are the first official cannabis sponsor of professional pickleball. This company announced the innovative agreement with United Pickleball Association, the UPA, parent company of the Carvana Pro Pickleball Tour, and Major League Pickleball by Margaritaville. I mean, this is wonderful. Margaritaville and now Trulieve Cannabis. You've literally got alcohol and cannabis companies sponsoring pickleball. This is just a giant party. I freaking love this. I mean, it's excellent to imagine just getting yourself in an altered state and then, running up the heart rate a little bit, not too much, but a little, playing some pickleball. And just in general, more sport leagues. The NBA entered into a cannabis partnership earlier this year. The NFL is still being a little cowardly, I think, waiting for the federal legalization to take part, and Major League Baseball as well, kind of sitting on its hands. But I'm just all for this. And as pickleball's popularity continues to explode, this is another step in the journey toward normalization. And I think it's going to help a lot. If people competing in these tournaments and people going to them to watch others compete, they're going to see the sponsorships, they're going to see the products around, they're going to see people with the logos on their t-shirts and their paddles and the cans that they're drinking on the sideline in between matches and stuff. This type of stuff might seem, kooky, it might seem a little bit gimmicky, but this is the kind of stuff that does move the normalization needle forward a little bit. So I personally, I'm all for it, and I just wanted to share that with you. I've linked the Forbes article below, and there's plenty more information about the Trulieve sponsorship, which they say is based on promoting wellness benefits of cannabis to a large and diverse audience of athletes and spectators, which is really what I just laid out for you.
That's enough.
Great point, Snoop. So that's going to do it for me on the news segment and this episode of the Cannabis Man podcast. Really appreciate you listening to the show. Be sure to leave a rating or review. Subscribe to it if you haven't already, whether it's through Apple, Spotify, YouTube, iHeart, wherever you're getting this show, subscribe to it. And also subscribe to the Weekly Chronic so you don't miss any product reviews and news coverage in between these new episodes, which come out every Friday. And new issues of the Weekly Chronic come out Tuesday mornings. And you can subscribe for free below by clicking on the link, and that'll take you to Substack, where you can subscribe to the Weekly Chronic. I'll be back again next week with another guest interview, more product reviews, more news stories relating to cannabis and its journey toward legalization, the end of prohibition, hopefully still very much within our grasp in the future, regardless of who sits on America's throne in the White House. No matter what goes on there, this movement toward ending the prohibition of cannabis, it won't be stopped. And the people of the country still feel exactly how they do. Floridians, don't despair. I'm sure there'll be another cannabis ballot initiative soon. Same thing in the Dakotas. Well done, Nebraska. I'm glad medical patients there will be able to get stuff. And well done, areas of Texas and Kentucky for doing the same thing. Baby steps. These are the things that matter, but we are moving one step at a time in the direction that we all want to go, which is normalization, decriminalization, and just the free-flowing access to cannabis. Hope you're able to enjoy some. If you tried either of the OGeez Creams Pack or the Sweet Sparks from Sweet Buzz, let me know what you thought of those. And if you got any guests or topics that you want me to explore on the show, send a text or contact the show via social media or email host@cannabismanpodcast.com. Be sure to call those you love, tell them how you feel, give them a hug, and ideally enjoy some wonderful cannabis with them, because this is all the time we get, and we never know when it's up. And I promise you, spending more time with those people that you're deeply connected with and that you care about, you'll never regret that going forward. Talk next week on the Cannabis Man Podcast. Bye-bye. Cannabis Man is 100% originally crafted by myself, Don Kleppen. Original theme music written and composed by Yusu Kim, aka Good Son.